talk a little bit about where medical devices fit in the timeline. Around the 1920s, the healthcare industry started their digital device ambitions with computerized medical devices. Initially, they were standalone, but over time, they have integrated with wireless receivers, cloud data storage, and the internet. Around when I was using a TRS-80, implantable medical devices, which we'll refer to now as IMDs, came on the scene where it was first believed the insulin pump and pacemaker was developed for commercial use. Around 1980, the pump was successfully implanted into a human body as a self-contained device that didn't require direct support from a physician. Over the years, further progress was made on miniaturizing IMDs to as small as a penny. Really small, right? Physicians use minimally invasive techniques to insert the implant, which lessens the pain and improves healing time for the patient. Adoption has continued to ramp up as costs have lowered for embedded systems and increased energy efficiency used for wireless connections. The IMDs have sensors which enable physicians to gather a wide range of health values, such as neural activity, heart rate, blood pressure, temperature, and oxygen saturation. Do you have a digital watch? These devices may be monitoring your health values as well. The watch is not an IMD, but the concept is still the same. It's gathering health values to provide you directly or to send to a physician to analyze. While the convenience is great, it does ask some serious questions about how these devices are being protected. In this chart, I show the four major implantable device categories and the adverse events matrix. These events could be attributed to a cyber attack, either through data manipulation or denial of service to the device. Patients who report adverse events after post-market activities should be investigated by the organization for root cause of the device failure and disqualify as a cyber-related event. For example, health institutions should have a safety risk process that allows patients to report on post-market activities, which then can be followed up and investigated by your internal teams. Just to highlight this slide here, these are patient safety issues as a direct response to a device malfunction. Here we show a cardiac implant. Could it inadvertently cause a heart attack? Drug delivery systems, like applying inappropriate dosage, could send someone into diabetic shock, and so on for the other device types. So here are the four major device categories for implantable medical devices. Cardiac implant systems, such as pacemakers and defibrillators, are used to prescribe appropriate treatment, such as monitoring and restoring regular heartbeat. Neurostimulators run an extension wire from a device located in the chest that adjusts the electrical impulse to the brain. The process used to prescribe treatment is called deep brain stimulation, DBS, and is given to treat a wide variety of neurological disorders, such as halting tremors with someone with Parkinson's disease, or relieving chronic migraines. In drug delivery systems, here is a microchip technology which releases a therapeutic on demand. The microchip is implanted just under the skin, and a low-level current is passed through it, which chemically dissolves a shield over each reservoir opening. This can be used as a controlled release dosage for treatments such as insulin injections for diabetes. Cochlear implants use a microchip system to improve speech recognition. The system uses a device that has an external battery and is placed behind the ear. A wire is then run to the base of the skull and stimulates the auditory nerve in order to provide the sense of sound for the nearly deaf. So, what do all these medical devices share in common? They can be networked either through short-range radio or wireless connection as a proxy to the internet. This is because physicians may want to remotely monitor or update instructions to the device based on the current level of care for the patient. To be more distinct, the cardiac device in the diagram below uses a cellular GPRS transmitter to send health information to the data center, in which then is analyzed by a physician in real time. The cochlear implant, a short-range radio transmission, requires a trip to the hospital, so the physician can monitor the voltage before the battery is completely drained, or even enhance and reprogram the speech signal that was captured. So let's move on now to how you would protect devices knowing the current landscape and what the future holds in this technology space. Susan Swartz, who is the FDA for strategic planning, says the process should be structured, systematic, and comprehensive. There are many frameworks and models you can follow, but I will list some popular ones here. Just to be clear, a framework provides the structure for a realized result or goal, unlike a model that is a schematic and is, in this context we are using, is set to describe components of an overall system. To start, you want to follow a common security framework. The NIST 837 standard prescribes how to follow a risk assessment for categorizing a system based on its data and using applied security controls. ISO 31000 and HITRUST are very similar, but look at it from a different lens. ISO started as a British standard, but has been more broadly adopted across industry globally. HITRUST has a different take on security controls and creates a focus on patient healthcare information specifically. JSP, for medical devices, main activities, has to do with the product security lifecycle when you plan to bring to market a device type. Usually, these frameworks crosswalk a set of controls using the standards to assure compliance in the regulatory and privacy space. If you heard of governance, risk, and compliance or GRC tools before, this was meant to solve this problem by unifying various control sets from different standards and allowing the risk analyst to construct a list of questions from it. Those questions then would be sent to your control owners, and then the responses would be ingested and mapped to the controls database. The tool can do many different things, such as third-party attestation and policy development, but this is beyond the scope of the current discussion. Just keep in mind that GRC tools can help ease the burden of your compliance activities if done properly. So now, I will go into more detail of these 4 remaining recommendations in a series of next slides. In the pre-market phase for medical device products, TIR 57 is used to describe what should happen during ideation and aligns with your quality control process. In the post-market phase, TIR 97 describes what you should do based on your post-market signals, such as when a patient reports an adverse event. This is an important feedback loop to your product security risk assessment and threat model when you're iterating over time, such as making a firmware update. JSP is your overarching framework that ties it in all together for the product development life cycle perspective. As you will notice, all the other standards on this list are being considered as part of the technology landscape, and it's set to come out later this year. From a 10,000-foot view, you will also notice this heat map by Forrester for the 4 likely scenarios with the potential to impact connected medical devices. Observe the risk severity outcome for each form of attack, with a high-level aggregate based on these categories below. Denial of service attacks were considered the most severe, with disruptions to the healthcare system and patient safety as a clear red flag. I really like using these heat maps to generate a visual for executives to help them understand overall risk posture. If you're not doing this right now, maybe you should consider it and add it as part of your plan. Second, you want to apply a zero trust policy to your threat assessment. Zero trust, as the name states, is a security model built around the mindset that no technology inside or outside of an organization can be trusted. The foundation of zero trust architecture came from a security forum developed in the early 2000s, where security specialists discussed cloud computing and deperimeterization. The phrase zero trust was coined later by an analyst at Forrester in 2013 and has been picked up by the industry to define how you protect data when there are no borders, such as working from home and cloud computing. You can see here I drew a boundary around the data center, which is between principals. I could have easily drew a boundary around the physician's computer and further microsegmented the data center using a multi-tiered architecture by isolating web, app, and database workloads. These logical boundaries are here to apply policy that manage access to other computer resources that you need help to define. Let's say you start with a greenfield deployment. You could start with an implicit deny all and work your way through the various components by explicitly allowing based on your policies. It really depends on your scope and what you're trying to work with. Retrofitting after the fact will just make it harder to implement and even more time consuming, when all this work should have been completed up front. If you need more guidance, the NIST 800-207 standard provides more of the how. So let's move on now to threat modeling. Threat modeling is a discipline and also a process used to identify potential threats or security fictions you create against individual components. You first want to start with a sketch. Have you ever had that aha moment and started scribbling on a table napkin? No, I don't recommend breaking out your pen over dinner. What I do recommend, however, is to start with your organization's whiteboard or a threat modeling tool. In fact, I found it pretty easy to work through the basics, such as a tool like Miro or Visio, to get the conversation started, and then begin your threat modeling process. When you meet with your stakeholders, be sure to start brainstorming with them by bringing your sketch to the table, and then they should provide the artifacts after they are further along in the design process. Data flows, swim lanes, L0 or context diagrams, and state machine diagrams used in app development should be something you are on the lookout for. When you're threat modeling with your team, the kill chain process that was developed by Lockheed Martin will help you think about each intrusion step along the way. The tactics and techniques you can use is STRIDE, which is a mnemonic that stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. Can be performed alongside the MITRE attack to identify new insight each round of the assessments. You may want to ask yourself 4 questions when going into the conversation. What are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? And did we do a good job? It can be useful to identify what can go wrong with components using STRIDE and MITRE, as this will help you uncover problem areas that need to be addressed. While there are many different models out there, what matters is you are threat modeling in a way that is most important to you and the organization. So if you manage to get this far, then great. You're on your way to being a threat analyst and not only helping your organization, but you may be saving lives as well. It's all about the big picture. Then what are we going to do about it? Are your mitigation tactics that are typically left to your risk management team to decide. If you're a small organization, you may not have a risk management team to handle it. Don't despair. You can do it yourself. Anyone can threat model, and even if you don't use a supporting standard, listen to the experts that can help you understand what to do. You may even be doing it right now without even realizing it, like creating a strong password or using 2-factor authentication. That is a security control. NIST 853, ISO, and HITRUST are the standards that list out tens of thousands of mitigating controls that pair up with your threat assessment. If you want to practice, start with the use case I described earlier for cardiac implant systems and apply the process I described here. I also included some helpful links at the end of the presentation so you can research it further. When you're done, track your work items in a backlog if you're using Agile, or an issue tracker if you're using Waterfall. Whichever methodology you use, the end result is still the same. You should have a bugs or issue list identified once you've decided you are done. It doesn't have to be perfect, but try to get your best effort based on your abilities. Device manufacturers also have a role to play for quality control of their products. The serious threat posed by vulnerabilities in the cyber supply chain has opened a certification and accreditation process that any organization may follow. The Open Trusted Technology Provider Standard and Framework, OTT PSPF certification, prescribes 3 levels of security. OTT covers a wide variety of security issues, including identifying and verifying the safety of components of your devices that provide evidence to outside parties. Having a combination of 1 or more tier levels can provide increased confidence over your supply chain practices, such as counterfeit chips and tampering of various system components. That in turn will meet your patient's expectations around device security. So what can I share here is expect new things to happen, and this is not speculation. During a social hour with MDIC and the FDA, it was indicated to us that we should anticipate to see it in future organization submissions, and they will ask to see your threat model. Also, the FDA's expectations is still evolving as new threat vectors emerge and they seek to understand how the medical device industry is maturing in this space. When submitting an application for approval and requesting feedback, please refer to their Q submission process that provides additional program guidance in this area. I'd like to give a shout out and say thanks to HISAC, MDIC, MITRE, University of Global Campus, and Adam Shostak that are training the next generation of threat analysts. Having been in IT for over 20 years and published an article based on my prior academic and technical training, it was refreshing to hear new perspectives on what good looks like in the medical device security domain. The boot camps have just concluded and MITRE's playbook is coming out shortly, so be on the lookout for that. It is my hope that safety will be harmonized with your confidentiality, integrity, and availability data principles, and has stretched your imagination as a way of thinking about this topic. I have included additional information here that will help you get started on this. StaySecure.com, I wrote an article on implantable medical devices. Adam's threat modeling with Stride will show you his approach using a structured, systematic, and comprehensive way to think as a threat analyst. MITRE's attack matrix for the enterprise will provide you the other lens when it comes to tactics and techniques in the kill chain process. The remaining references I included here, such as the standards and frameworks for medical devices, as well as risk management for your patients. Please take a look at them.